the United States and its growing national debt. Say this about all the bickering over the federal debt ceiling. At least people are talking openly about our nation's growing debt load. This $14.3 trillion issue is front and center, exactly where it should be. And into the fray comes a thoughtful new paper by Joseph E. Gagnon, a senior fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics, which studies economic policy. Written with a research analyst there, the report states plainly that government debt will grow to dangerous and unsustainable levels in most advanced and many emerging economies over the next 25 years, if not sooner, if there are no changes in current tax rates or government benefit programs in retirement and health care, and is virtually beyond dispute. The report then lays out a range of outcomes, some merely unsettling, others downright scary, that face us as a nation if we continue down the big spending path we are currently on. They report the global outlook for government debt over the next 25 years, implications for the economy and public policy, arrives when our debt as a percentage of gross domestic product is approximately 65% and rising fast. Much of the recent increase, up from 43% in 2007, is the result of the panic of 2008 and the ensuing recession, when the government stepped in to mitigate the damage. The authors do not suggest that policymakers should hurry to raise taxes or cut spending right now. They acknowledge that the economic recovery is still very fragile and propose that lawmakers wait to implement budget cuts currently under discussion until 2013 to 2015. Additional cuts would ideally go into effect in 2016. So, what needs to be done now is to design a long-term plan to reduce fiscal deficits in the future. The authors contend that such a program would reassure the markets, keep interest rates low, and instill greater confidence and certainty about future tax and spending policies, thereby encouraging businesses to commit the resources to job-creating investment projects, or at least in theory. An intriguing aspect of their analysis is how it views the rising tide of debt around the world from a historical perspective. For so many countries to be groaning under so much debt at the same time is unusual, the authors say. More typical are the somewhat contained debt crises, like in Latin America in the 1980s or in Russia in 1998. But nonetheless, these times are like never seen before. And while both of those episodes reverberated beyond the countries from which they sprang, today's debt problems are far more widespread and, as a result, much more worrisome. The simultaneous buildup of very large public deficits and debt positions in virtually all of the advanced high-income countries is a new element at work in the global economy, the report says. It is unique in peacetime for so many countries to have so much debt, Mr. Gagnon said in an interview. But he added that global capital markets and the access to lenders that these markets provide might possibly mute the ill effects of this borrowing binge. The paper assesses the potential consequences of a more pervasive debt crisis, one involving a number of countries in the same perilous position at the same time. The authors also consider the impact that future interest rate increases may have on these debt loads and provide separate estimates of how debt levels would grow under differing circumstances. They incorporate into these estimates expected growth rates in various regions, as well as rising healthcare costs and retirement obligations. The analysis uses figures from the International Monetary Fund and the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. Some of the results are surprising. For example, the study rebutes the commonly held notion that the outlook for Europe is worse than for the United States as far as debt levels and obligations are concerned. This is because some Eurozone countries have already begun to deal with their fiscal problems, Mr. Cagnon explained. They've made some changes to long-run pensions, such as raising retirement ages, he said, and they've already made spending cuts and tax increases. Another surprise in the study, emerging markets are in much better shape, or so the authors say. Now, to the numbers, all of which are based on the status quo and tax rates and government obligations relating to health care and retirement. Of course, these scenarios are depending on known factors, not the unknown things. Under a best-case outlook, according to the authors, the nation's net federal debt will rise to at least 155% of gross domestic product in 2035, if not sooner, more than double the current levels. Net debt is defined as the government's financial liabilities minus its financial assets. Under a more pessimistic view on growth rates, that load ratchets up to 302% of GDP that year. As the paper notes, debt ratios of around 200% of gross domestic product are at the extreme limit of what advanced economies can experience without becoming destabilizing. In other words, these high debt ratios are unsustainable, and this cannot be, and something will have to give somewhere. This country can't keep kicking the can down the road much longer. Overall, they say, debt levels in the advanced economies would rise to 122% of GDP given an upbeat outlook, or if all goes well, and 234% under grimmer circumstances, the study projects. Both Japan and the United States exceed those figures in expected debt loads. So, given how our debt is growing rapidly, a fiscal crisis looms if policymakers do nothing. They also say there may never be a single defining moment of crisis, the authors write, but rather a drift into ever higher inflation and interest rates, ever lower growth or deeper recession, and eventually hyperinflation, along with rapid currency depreciation. Most economists would view such a prospect as a progressive strangulation of a nation's well-being. This is straight talk on a vital topic. Let's hope our leaders understand that living beyond our means will not work much longer. It's also about what kind of world are we leaving to the future generations? What kind of economy will the kids be inheriting? And this should be one of the most important questions that there is. Again, Daniel chapter 12, and at that time shall Michael stand up, the great prince, which stands for the children of thy people, and there shall be a time of troubles, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered, every one that shall be found written in the book. 2. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. 3. And they that be wise shall shine as the brightness of the firmament, and they that turn many to righteousness, as the stars forever and ever. Revelation chapter 22, verse 12. And, behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me, to give every human according as his work shall be. 13. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. Yes, it's time for all prophecy to be fulfilled. The limits or the tipping points are being reached, because everything is connected and everything is numbered. And this is what I see, think, and feel.